Hello everyone! Today, we're going to have a very special video because I want to share with you my theories and concepts about the new turrets that might appear in the next update of Melon Playground. As you know, in version 32.0, the developer really surprised us with a whole bunch of new turrets, healing, knife, rocket, and even blade trap, which has its own set of rules. But if such ideas appeared in just one update, imagine what the future holds. So, let's start with the first idea. I call it the acid turret. This turret could shoot acid streams. Imagine an NPC taking damage not instantly, like from a bullet or a knife, but gradually, their body begins to corrode with acid. And we can observe this process in real time. Moreover, the acid could interact with objects as well. Metal rusts, wood begins to crumble, fabric is burned through. This will add a completely new type of experiments, where the damage is not instant, but stretched over time. The advantages of such a turret are obvious. It will diversify the game and give players the opportunity to do longer and more spectacular experiments. There are also disadvantages. The acid may be too powerful and quickly destroy NPCs, which will make it less interesting for those who like to play with consequences. But still, you have to admit, the acid turret sounds really cool and fits into the style of the game. I think the developer can easily implement such a mechanic. Now let's move on to my second idea, which I'm sure many people will enjoy. I'm calling it the magnet turret. How would it work? Imagine a device that doesn't shoot knives, missiles, or acid, but instead uses a magnetic field. When the turret sees an NPC or a metal object nearby, it begins to attract it with great force. It would be very spectacular. NPCs literally fly in the air. Weapons and items are torn out of their hands and stick to the turret. And there is a sense of chaos around. But the most interesting thing starts when this turret has different modes. For example, one mode is attraction. Everything around is gathered to the turret in one heap. And another mode is repulsion. When it is on the contrary, it scatters NPCs and items in different directions like an explosive wave. Such functionality would really make it unique, because the player chooses how to use the turret in experiments. Let's think about the advantages of the magnet turret. First, its new effects and physics that expand the possibilities for experimentation in the game. Second, you can create entire scenes with massive battles, where the turret takes away weapons from NPCs and leaves them defenseless. Third, it's a great way to create chaos by imagining that you have hundreds of items on your map, and the turret simply collects them into a massive pile. However, there are also drawbacks. The turret may become too powerful and disrupt the game's balance, as NPCs and items become completely helpless. Another disadvantage is the potential for lag. If you use the magnet turret on a large map with a lot of objects, the game may not be able to handle the load. However, the idea of a magnetic turret seems very realistic. Melon Playground already has various mechanisms that interact with objects and physics. It would be possible for the developer to add another tool for experimentation that focuses on object interactions. If you think about it, the magnet turret is not only fun, but also a scientific tool. After all, many players like to not just make meat, but to test how different objects, liquids, and NPCs will behave under the influence of external forces. And this turret is perfect for this purpose. The next turret idea I had was probably the craziest and most cinematic. I called it the black hole turret. Imagine this. You place this turret on a map, and instead of the usual missiles or knives, it releases small, miniature black holes. Each of these spheres begins to suck in everything around it in PCs, objects, liquids, and even pieces of destroyed objects. The longer the sphere remains active, the stronger its gravitational pull becomes. Now let's imagine a scene. Several NPCs start running around the map, but as soon as the turret fires a black hole, they don't even have time to escape. Everything is sucked into a single center. This would not only be visually stunning, but also provide endless opportunities for experimentation. The advantages of such a turret are evident. The effect of absolute chaos. No one or thing can withstand the power of a black hole. The ability to conduct scientific experiments. Players will be able to check which items fly the most inside what happens if liquids get inside, and how the map will behave. It's an unreal visual. Imagine how beautiful the effect of a rotating black hole would look, with particles and NPCs flying around it. However, there are also disadvantages. Firstly, it is potentially a very heavy turret for the game. Too many objects will be moving at the same time, and the FPS may drop to 0. Secondly, this is a weapon that essentially breaks all the laws of balance. No NPC can withstand a black hole. And thirdly, there is a risk that it will be too easy for players to complete any experiments with such a turret, as it does all the work for them. And you know, the most interesting thing about the black hole turret is that it could have different levels of power. For example, a small black hole that just attracts objects within a small radius, and a giant version that sucks up literally half of the map. Wouldn't that be epic? After all, many of the turrets in Melon Playground are based on weapons, such as knives, missiles, and bullets. But a turret that uses cosmic powers takes it to a whole new level. And I'm pretty sure that players would love this idea, because it opens up not just new experiments, but a whole new style of play. Now, let's talk about another idea I have for a new turret, and I think it would be one of the most useful in the game. I've named it the Nano Swarm Turret, a turret that releases a swarm of nanodrones. The concept is simple. Instead of regular bullets or missiles, this turret activates a swarm of tiny mechanical creatures that find and attack their targets on their own. Imagine you put such a turret, and dozens of small glowing dots fly out of it, which instantly cling to the NPC and begin to deal damage. The advantages of this turret are huge. It does not shoot at one target, but immediately attacks several. As the swarm divides and finds different NPCs, it can fly around obstacles. That is, if you hide a character behind a wall, the bullet will not reach, but the swarm will simply bypass the obstacle and continue its attack. The effect of fear and chaos. NPCs seem to be surrounded by a cloud of aggressive creatures, making it difficult to hide. But the most interesting part is that these nanodrones could have different modes of operation. For example, attack mode is when the swarm deals damage by literally tearing NPCs to pieces. Slowdown mode is when the nanodrones inject a kind of virtual paralyzing fog, causing NPCs to move more slowly. Destructive mode is when the swarm corrodes iron objects, such as doors, beams, and even enemy turrets. There are also some drawbacks. Firstly, if the nanodrones exist for too long, they will become invincible, which could disrupt the game's balance. Secondly, visually, such a turret may be too heavy for weak devices, because a swarm of dozens of particles will need to be calculated in real time. And you know, I think that it is the Nano Swarm Turret that could become the turret of the future, which perfectly combines technology and chaos. Unlike conventional turrets, this is not just a weapon, it is already a whole system that thinks itself and adapts to the situation. And honestly, I'm sure that if the developers had actually implemented this idea, players would have spent hours experimenting with this swarm, testing who the nanodrones would attack faster, whether they could be lured into a trap, and what would happen if there were multiple swarms.